Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Photoshop Training Hour. Yes, that's the new official name of the show, the Photoshop Training Hour. So I know that we were coming up with names in the last few episodes, and we finally decided on the poll that I posted last week. Thank you for all those of you who voted on that poll. So yeah, that's the name of the show, the Photoshop Training Hour. Let me know in the chat what you think. I am your host, Jesus Ramirez, and in this episode, I'm going to show you Photoshop tips and tricks that you probably don't know. You'll let me know in the chat if you knew them or not as I show them to you. I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat. Thank you so much, Beldier, as always, for joining me not only in the Photoshop Training Hour episodes, but also on my Adobe live streams. We have Cesar Jimenez, Naveen, Misha, Falcon, Duru. Thank you so much for joining. Jorge Garcia, The Imaging, thank you so much. Let me know in the chat where you're watching from. I'm streaming from the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area in California. But yeah, thank you so much for joining. Now, before we get into Photoshop, I quickly want to show you this page right here. So this is the community tab on my YouTube channel. So if you go to my YouTube channel, Photoshop Training channel, you'll see the community tab. And as you can see, 80% of you who voted prefer the Photoshop Training Hour as the name of the show. And I also want to give shout outs to the person who suggested that name. Let me scroll down, and here she is. I believe her name is pronounced Jian. If it's not, I do apologize for mispronouncing your name, but Jian V is the person who suggested the Photoshop Training Hour, which is what we're going with. And thank you for all those of you who submitted names for the show. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much. The name of the show is the Photoshop Training Hour, and thank you for all your wonderful suggestions. So let me take a quick look at the chat and see what we have going on here. We have, oh wow, we have people from all over the world. We have people watching from Bangladesh, Indonesia, South Africa, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, awesome, Denmark, Mexico, Ukraine, UK, Manchester, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Brazil, I don't even know where that is. I do apologize. Pakistan, India. Thank you so much for joining me. Dennis is saying it's 7:05 p.m. for him, 19:05, and it's only 10 a.m. for me here in California. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. People from the US, from Greece. Awesome. So great to see everybody here today. So yeah, why don't we jump right into Photoshop? Actually, no, before we jump into Photoshop, I do gotta mention our sponsors, MSI. MSI is sponsoring today's video, and actually I'm surprised that I don't have my MSI logo up here. I must have accidentally disabled it, but MSI is the sponsor of this stream, and I do want to thank MSI for being a sponsor. So MSI has these laptops, desktops, and monitors that they make. They do sponsor this YouTube channel. The laptop that you're looking at now is the Creator 15 laptop. This is a laptop that I'm currently using, and it's a fantastic laptop for creators. It has fantastic color representation, 100% Adobe RGB. The MSI laptops are all calibrated at the factory, so they have great color representation. You can check them out. There's a link to them below in the description. I'll talk more about MSI a little later on in the stream. But what I want to do now is move over into Photoshop so that we can just take a look at some Photoshop tips and tricks. These are in no particular order. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. I'll be looking over in the chat so that I can answer any questions that you have. So again, these are in no particular order, and I hope that these tips and tricks help you improve and speed up your workflow. So we're going to start with like a really simple one. So we have a layer, and we have a layer mask, right? And obviously, if you select the layer mask, when you paint with black, you hide. And if you click on the layer thumbnail, the focus, the white outline is now on the thumbnail. And if you paint, then you actually paint on the pixels over the mask. I think a lot of you probably know that already. But you can actually switch back and forth from these two without actually clicking on the layer. There's actually a keyboard shortcut to switch over the focus into the layer thumbnail. If you press Control on Windows, that's Command on the Mac, and tap on the number 2, you'll notice that the focus switch over from the layer mask into the layer thumbnail. I'll do that again. Control, that's Command on the Mac, and tap on the number 2 would switch the focus over from the layer mask to the layer thumbnail. Now that can be very beneficial if you're working on multiple monitors like I am now. You may have your layers panel way over on this monitor and you might be working on the monitor over here. And it could take a while just to scroll over and then just click on that layer thumbnail. So it's very easy to just simply hold, that keyboard shortcut Control on Windows, Command on the Mac, and tap on the number 2 to switch the focus onto the layer thumbnail. What if you want to switch the focus onto the layer mask? Well, the keyboard shortcut for that is actually Control and the / key. So I'll do that again. Control 2 for changing the focus into the layer thumbnail, and Control / that is the key right below the backspace key or the delete key on North American keyboards. So right next to the bracket keys in the same row as the letter P. So Control and the / key will get the focus over onto the layer mask thumbnail. Let me know in the chat if you knew that trick already. We have Eddie from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Nice. Good to see you, Eddie. We have Martin from the Czech Republic watching. Nice. We have the old school video gamer from Ireland. Thank you so much. Kent Irvin from Kingsport, Tennessee. Fantastic. Good to see you. Oh, my title says Tricks and Tricks. I should edit that title. Yeah, Tips and Tricks should have been the title, but thank you for letting me know. I wonder if I can correct that right now. We're going to test it, so I'm going to correct it. So we'll see. I fixed the title. Let me know if it changed or not. But yeah, I was typing the title too quickly, I guess, but thank you for letting me know in the chat. Awesome. So this is one of the shortcuts I wanted to show you. Another shortcut that I think is very valuable that I don't see a lot of people using is a shortcut to move layers. So let me just create a bunch of layers. It really doesn't matter that there's nothing in these layers, but you probably know this. If you click and drag on a layer, you can change the layer stack order like so. I'm just clicking and dragging on the layer. But there's actually a keyboard shortcut. If you hold Control on Windows, Command on the Mac, and tap on the bracket keys, you can move the layer up and down in the layer stack. And the cool thing is that if you add the Shift key to that, so Control, Command, hold Shift, and then tap on the right bracket key, the layer will jump up to the top of the layer stack. Or if you tap on the left bracket key, the layer will jump down all the way to the bottom of the layer stack. So that's a useful keyboard shortcut as you're working. Again, you may not have your layers panel in the same monitor. It might be somewhere else. Even if it's in the same monitor, it's a lot easier to just use those keyboard shortcuts to jump layers up and down the layer stack instead of clicking and dragging them. It just saves you a little bit of time. Nice. We have Claudio from Chile. Good to see you. Irma from Holland. Awesome. Prasant said that he knows this tip. Awesome. Graphic design tutorial. Why can't anyone respond to me? I'm responding to you. Hello, how's it going? We got more I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Mordizi from Ghana. Good to see you. Shlomi from Israel. Nice. Darko from Serbia. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Great. So what I'm going to do now is just go and just show you a few more tips and tricks. Here's another one that I really like for both compositing and retouching. So if you're somebody who's doing retouching and compositing, then, and actually right now, the reason that I can't delete is because the opacity is enabled. So I can just press the escape key. Notice right now, and this is actually a tip that I didn't mean to show you, but I accidentally had the opacity selected. You can see the opacity here on the top, and you see how it's in blue, right? So it's active, but I wanted to delete the layers. So when I was tapping the backspace key to delete the layers, it wasn't really working because the opacity is selected. So if you're ever in any mode, if you're if anything is selected in blue and you can't use your keyboard shortcuts, or if a window comes up that you didn't intend for it to come up, anything happens in Photoshop, you can use what I like to call the whoopsie daisy key. Like, whoopsie daisy, I made a mistake. How do I get out? That key is the escape key, is the key on the top left of your keyboard. So no matter what in Photoshop, if you just want to escape or leave or cancel something, just press the escape key and you'll be back in the main Photoshop interface without anything selected. And then you can just tap on the keyboard shortcuts to do whatever it is that you needed to do. In this case, I tapped on the backspace key to delete those layers. Again, the escape key will get you out of anywhere. For example, you might accidentally bring up the layer style window. Just press the escape key and it should take it away. Or anything really. If you accidentally, I mean, I don't know how you accidentally select a filter that you didn't intend to, just press the escape key and you'll get out. Again, if you accidentally activate an input box that you didn't intend to, hit the escape key and you'll jump right out. What version is this? This is Photoshop 2021. I'm always using the latest version of Photoshop, but so far everything I talked about today should be applicable to older versions as well. Do I have an Instagram account? Yes, I do. I have two. JR from PTC, my semi-personal account. I post a lot of stuff about Photoshop, obviously, there. And then at Photoshop Training Channel, which is the Instagram account for this YouTube channel. What can we do if we mess up focus in Photoshop? I'm not exactly what you mean by that. There's a couple ways. So for example, you can select, if you select this layer, like layer 0, and you want it to focus on layer 1, obviously you can click on the layer, but you can also select layers. So this is actually very similar to what I was talking about earlier. Earlier, I was holding control and the bracket keys to move a layer up and down in the layer stack. But if you want to change the focus, which layer you have selected, instead of holding control, you can hold the Alt key on Windows, and that's the Option key on the Mac, and tap on the bracket keys and see how the focus changes from layer 0 to layer 1. So all I'm doing is holding the Alt key and tapping on those bracket keys, and then you can go up and down in the layer stack. Not move the layer, but move the focus of the layer. So I don't know if that's what you meant on that question. Cool. How can you switch the shortcut of the mask thumbnail switching? Because it seems the shortcut looks a bit complicated. So generally speaking, you can go into Edit, and you can go into keyboard shortcuts here, and this window will come up, and you have all the keyboard shortcuts in Photoshop here. And if you don't like one, you can just come in the box and then change the keyboard shortcut to whatever you want. So this is how you would change the keyboard shortcuts for pretty much anything. So you kind of have to look through here and then change the keyboard shortcut to whatever you want. Let me see if there's any other questions in the chat. Awesome. Cool. So the next thing that I want to show you, like what I was already started mentioning earlier, but then we got sidetracked with all these different keyboard shortcuts, is that if you're a photographer or compositor, maybe even a designer. So let me know in the chat what you do. Are you a photographer, designer, compositor, maybe videographer? Let me know in the chat what type of work you create in Photoshop. But basically, what I wanted to show you is a trick that will help you if you're compositing and if you're retouching. And again, it might be helpful for other areas as well. And that is, a lot of times when you're compositing or retouching, you may get really, really close to the image to make some edits. So in this case, let's just assume that I wanted to remove these drops from the image, right? So I'm really close here trying to remove these drops with the spot healing brush tool. But when I do that, I really can't see how that's affecting my overall image. And a lot of times you may want to see how those minor adjustments affect your overall composite or your overall retouch. So what you can do is use this incredibly useful feature in Photoshop. If you go into if you go into Window and select Arrange, at the very bottom of the Arrange dropdown, you will see New Window 4, and then the name of the documents that you have open in Photoshop. In this case, I only have one document open, so I only have one option. If you click on that, Photoshop will open a window of exactly the same document. Now, this is very important. This is not a duplicate document. This is not a separate instance. It's the same document. So if I come in here and I make an adjustment, that same adjustment appears on the other tab because it's the same document. They're not different ones. So that's, I need to make that very clear. This is not a separate document. Same document, two windows. What I can do now is go into Window, Arrange, and select either 2 up horizontal or 2 up vertical. In this case, we'll do 2 up vertical so we can put them side by side. So what I can do now is zoom in really, really close on one, and on the other one, I can just, fit it on screen so that I can see the overall image. And obviously, this works better if I have 2 monitors and I have a little more real estate to work with, but I think you'll get the idea. So what I can come in here and do is I can start making adjustments now. So let me just do an adjustment here so that you can see. Keep an eye out on the clip here on his backpack. I'm just going to remove it, and it's not going to be, you know, the best retouching job in the world, but I think you'll get the idea. I'm just going to use the clone stamp tool, click on here, and then just paint. And notice that as I'm painting, I'm removing it from the other image as well. See that? So that way you can really get in close, work on detail, and see how your adjustments affect the overall composite. And, you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe I can come in here and then just remove some of these imperfections here, maybe these stains or droplets, whatever they are. But as you can see, all these changes that I'm making are also appearing on the other window at the same time. So you might come in here and you might want to work on some of the details in his eyes. For example, maybe you want to increase the highlight in his eye, so you want to get in there close, and, you know, I just add that highlight there, and, you know, that might be a little too much. You can see it on the larger image, so maybe just add just a little bit of, you know, a highlight or whatever it is that you're trying to do on the image. It really doesn't matter. The point is that you can see your minor adjustments in the larger view, so that way that saves you the time from zooming in all the way to see the adjustment, then zoom out to see how it affects the overall image. I think it's a very powerful way to work, and it just allows you to not zoom in and out so much. Also, when you're working on this view, what you can do is obviously hold the space bar to pan, right? You see how I'm using the space bar to pan? But if you hold shift and you click on the space bar, you pan both images at the same time. See that? So I'm holding shift and I'm holding the space bar and I'm clicking and dragging. If I just hold the space bar without holding the shift key, I will only move the document that I'm currently clicking on. But if I hold shift and click and drag, so I'm holding shift, the space bar, and clicking and dragging, I'm moving both documents at the same time. Does that make sense? Which are your most frequently used hotkeys and for which purpose, along with a pen tablet? I don't know what my most frequently used would be, but if I had to give you an answer, probably the left and right bracket keys to adjust my brush size, the left and right bracket keys and holding control to move up a layer up and down in the layer stack like I showed you earlier. Those probably will be it. And obviously the keyboard shortcuts for the individual tools in the toolbar. Let me see if there's... Cool. We said we have a lot of photographers in the chat. Thanks so much for letting me know. Ooh, we have a map maker and designer. That's super cool, Dennis. We have a lot of we have IGGP, who's a photographer and graphic designer. Cool. Emmanuel and Tracy are both designers. Fantastic. We have Shankar, who's a photographer from Nepal. Cool. He uses Lightroom and now is learning Photoshop. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat about changing the background and color matching. So I'm just going to do a quick example on that, changing the background and color matching. So I wasn't planning on showing that, but since everybody's asking, I'll show you a quick thing that you can do. So I know that I have a couple images here that will work for this example. So this is one image here. So let me open that up. And I've done this tutorial on my YouTube channel, so you might have seen this already, but it will answer that question. So if I have this sunset image with this guy, you know, how can we match this? Well, there's really only, I mean, there's a lot of steps when it comes to compositing, but you can break them down to maybe 3 or 4, you know, larger steps and then fine tune those larger steps, right? So the first step is your masking, right? So we have a background and we have our foreground. How do we mask this? There's a lot of ways of masking in Photoshop. One of the easiest ways in Photoshop 2020 and newer is by simply clicking on the Remove Background button, which uses artificial intelligence known as Adobe Sensei. This analyzes the image and tries to locate the main subject and mask it out from the background using a layer mask. Here's a tip for the layer mask. If you hold shift and click on the mask, you can disable it. See that? So you don't delete pixels. So that's the great thing about working with a layer mask. You don't delete pixels. You work non-destructively. You can always come back and edit them, right? So holding shift and clicking will disable the mask. Holding alt, that's option on the Mac, So Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and clicking on the layer thumbnail will show you the actual mask. White reveals, black conceals. What's in white is what shows, what's in black is what's hidden. And obviously you can paint on that mask to change what's shown and what's hidden. But anyway, you can always fine tune the mask. When you have the layer mask active, you can go into select and mask. And from here, you can zoom in and make sure that you don't have any jagged edges or anything like that. You can increase the smoothness, the contrast a little bit, and you can just press OK. Smoothness removes the mask, the jaggedness of the mask edge. And to show you what I mean by that is if you click on this view button and go to black and white, what I'm really trying to do here is not to have jagged edges. If I reduce the smoothing, you can see the edges here are jagged. See that right up here on top of his arm? They're very jagged. So what I'm doing here is just increasing the smoothness to straighten those edges out so that the mask looks a little bit better. Then I'll press OK. Notice that I didn't do anything to his hair. I like to work with the hair separately because when you start smoothing the mask, you'll also smooth the edges of his hair, and they're vastly different. Before we work on the hair, what I do want to do is make sure that my mask is looking good. Notice that we have some halos here, and we're gonna fix those in a moment. And we have these corners there. So with the brush tool, what I can do is paint with black to hide these corners. Another thing that I could do is I could come in here, click once, hold shift, and click again to draw a straight line between the 2 points. So click once. Let me make a larger brush so you can see. So if you click once and hold shift and click again, you'll make a straight line between those 2 points. So you can do that as well and follow the edges. And I'm holding the space bar to click and drag and pan, and I can just come in here, zoom in really close, and work on this area here that the mask missed. In this case, I can use the polygonal lasso tool to click once, click again, and just do that triangular selection. You can fill with the foreground color, which is currently black, by holding Alt and backspace. That's Option Delete on the Mac. If you want to fill with the background color, you can hold Control, which is Command on the Mac, and the Delete key. Or I said that so bad, I'm so sorry. Control backspace on Windows, Command Delete on the Mac. And to deselect the selection, notice that I have an active selection. You can press Control D on Windows, Command D on the Mac. But anyway, so my mask is looking okay. I'm gonna work in the hair in a moment, but what I'm gonna do now is try to remove some of these halos. You can see that I have a few edge halos, and the way that you would do that is by going into Filter, Other, Minimum. And you've been seeing me use this filter so much in the past. I've used it on almost every tutorial for like, the last, I don't know, several years. But the point is that you can increase the, make sure that you set the preserve to roundness and increase the radius. And you notice that when you increase the radius, you contract the mask. So you don't want to contract it too much. You just want to contract it enough so that you remove those edge halos. So just keep clicking and dragging until you remove it. Notice that I did a good job now in removing the halos, but I went into the shirt. That's okay. I can press OK and just paint with white to bring back the shirt. See that? The sleeve here? So just bring that back. And obviously you can just keep going around and making sure that everything else looks great. Fantastic. Now let's work on the hair. With the layer mask thumbnail selected, I can go back into select and mask, and I can do one of two things. I can simply select any one of these selection tools and click on refine hair, and that will automatically refine the hair for you. I can zoom in and you can see how Photoshop tried to refine the hair. It didn't do a perfect job. I can still come in here and paint with white to fill in these areas that should not be hidden, like so. And I think that this looks pretty good, and I can press OK, and that's what the hair looks like. So, we're making good progress. Let me take a second and look at the chat and answer some questions. Do I know how to use Illustrator, Premiere Pro, and After Effects? To different levels of degrees, yes. Graphic tablet versus mouse. I prefer the tablet. I like to teach with a mouse. It's just easier, but when I'm really doing work, I use a tablet. I have my Wacom tablet right here. I have my stylus right here, as you can see. Cool. Nice. So what I'm going to do now is continue with this composite. So another thing when you're compositing is you need to take it into consideration your light sources, right? So I have the sun here on the left, and the light should be shining on his left side, but in reality it's shining on his right. So this wouldn't be a good composite. So always think about your light sources. So in this case, I can press Control T on Windows, Command T on the Mac to transform and flip the layer horizontally. So now this looks more realistic. The light sources in the scene are matching. And you know what? I'm going to scale this layer down so that it matches better. So Control T, Command T to transform, scale this down, and I'm going to select the crop tool and crop it down. That way, this looks more like an actual photo, something like that. And you know, he's looking out into the distance, into the sun. He's wearing sunglasses, so I hope he's not hurting his eyes, but you know, that's what he's doing. So one of the things that you can do is create the curves adjustment layer. And with the curves adjustment layer, what you can do is use one of the auto color correction adjustments. So when you hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on Auto, you'll get these color correction adjustments. And these were designed to remove color cast and to neutralize an image, but you can use them to color match. So let me show you how to do that. What you need to do is first make sure that the curve is only affecting the layer below. So you can click on the clipping mask icon so that your adjustments only affect the model here. Also, we need the focus, the white outline on the layer thumbnail. This is very, very important. Make sure that the layer thumbnail is active. The focus needs to be on the layer thumbnail, not the layer mask. Again, very, very important, or otherwise this won't work. Then you can reset the layer so that we can start from scratch. Hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click on Auto, and that will bring up the auto color correction options. Make sure that Find Dark and Light Colors is selected and uncheck Snap Neutral Midtones. Then you have to tell Photoshop what color the shadows are for this particular layer. Well, the shadows should be the same color as the background because we're trying to match that type of style. So I can click on that and just click on the darkest element in the background, which is this orange, and you can always click and drag down to make it even darker, maybe something like that. And then do the same thing for the highlights. What color should the highlights be? Well, you don't want to use white or a specular highlight in the scene. Just use, you know, the predominant highlight color in that scene, in this case yellow, and you can adjust it any way that you want as well. When you have your color selected, all you need to do now is press OK. Photoshop will ask you if you want to make these your default colors. In 99.9% of the cases, you don't want to do that, so just say no. You want to keep them black and white. And notice in the properties panel, you can see that the changes happen in the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel. And in the RGB composite, you can see those color lines there going all over the place, showing you how that color effect was applied. The important thing is that the RGB curve, this white line here, wasn't changed at all. It's still straight, it's still at default. And that's great because that means that you can now control the contrast of the layer with that line. So I can click and drag down a little bit to add a little bit of contrast. See that? So just trying to find something that matches. Click and drag up on the top part of the curve. This is called an S curve because it kind of looks like an X, and it gives contrast to the image. So you need to just click and drag and find an appropriate spot so that your composite looks realistic. So something like this, I would say it works. And this is the before and the after. And I think this is a great way of applying color matching in Photoshop if your background image has a strong color cast or color grade or something like that. So yeah, I wasn't planning on showing this, but a lot of people were asking on how to composite and color match in Photoshop. Awesome, Abdul, thank you so much. He's saying awesome tricks. I appreciate that. Oh, thank you so much, Abdul. Not a question, but your most knowledgeable YouTube Photoshop tutor. Or after 15 years of using Photoshop, you never failed to teach me awesome tips and tricks that I never knew about. Awesome. I'm so glad you find this useful, Abdul. Let me know in the chat if you're also finding this tips and tricks useful. How do I remove background removal accuracy in low-res images? You're gonna have to get your hands dirty. You're gonna have to go in there and paint things away, disregard things that are too difficult to select. It's just basically what I did here, but with a lot more fine-tuning. Let me see. JD is saying, thanks for all your excellent tips from North Carolina. Actually, JD, I'm going to go visit North Carolina for the very first time next month. Is it pronounced Raleigh? That's where I'm going. I have a friend there in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'll be there a couple days. And then I'm going to take a road trip up north, hitting, all the states all the way up to Vermont, come back around west towards Chicago, come down to Tennessee, and loop back up towards Georgia and South Carolina, back up to Raleigh, and fly home. So it's going to be about a 3-week trip coming up in 2 months. So that's going to be my summer vacation if you want to think about it. I'm still considering what I'm going to do for the show when I'm gone. So I might actually stream some episodes of the Photoshop Training Hour from the road from different states. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to find good internet connection along the way so that I can stream, from my laptop so that we don't miss an episode of the Photoshop Training Hour while I'm on my trip. Cool. What is the difference in the mask between remove background and select subject? Yeah, that's a good question. So let me show you the answer to that. Let me just delete the layer mask. So in the properties panel, when you have a layer selected, you have remove background and select subject. Remove background will do what you saw earlier. It will make a selection and then apply a layer mask to that selection. And select subject is the same thing without applying the layer mask. So you'll just get the selection around the person. See that? We have the selection around the person. Actually, here's another tip for you guys. When you have a selection active, you can go into the channels panel. Actually, that's not what I wanted to show you. When you have a selection active, you can press the Q key on the keyboard, and that enables the quick mask mode, and you can almost treat it like a layer mask. You can paint with white and black to add or subtract to the selection. But when you go to the channels panel, you'll see that you have a quick mask channel. If you wanted to save that selection, you can just click and drag it over into the new layer icon, new channel icon, and now you have a quick mask, and I can just call this mask, give it a name. I can just call it man. So now I have my selection saved. So selections are nothing more than channels, really. So now I have my selection saved. So if I ever need to load it, I can just hold Control on Windows, Command on the Mac, and click, and it loads as a selection. That is the same thing, literally the same thing as going into Select and clicking on Save Selection down here. And I can give it a name. I'll call it man number 2. Press OK, and notice that I get exactly the same result. So that's another way of doing the same thing. So selections are essentially channels, and you can just save them if you enable the quick mask mode and then copy that quick mask into the channels panel. Is the same thing as saving a selection. And also, I mentioned earlier that holding Control and clicking on a channel thumbnail will load it as a selection, but also notice that there's a keyboard shortcut here, Control 7. What does that mean? Or Control 6? Well, if I press Control 6, I select that channel, right? Control 7, I select it. But the cool thing is that if I press Control Alt and then that number, it will load it as a selection. That's Command Option on the Mac and then the number. It will load that channel as a selection. So in this case, Control 7. If I were to hold Control Alt and the number 7, notice that I have a selection around that channel. Just so that it's a little different, I'm going to go into channel number 6, and I'm just going to paint with white over here, just so that we have a different channel and you can see the difference. There we go. So if I press Control Alt and number 6, notice that I can load the active pixels on that channel. Control Alt 7, I load the active pixels on that channel. So this is a cool thing, because you might be working like composite, like I was doing here earlier. And let me make sure I come back into the RGB view. So you might be working on a composite, and you might want to create a layer mask that only affects the person. Well, you know that you have a channel that you saved based on the person, and that channel's channel number 7. So I can press Control Alt 7. It loads as a selection. I can go into the hue and saturation adjustment layer, and now I can desaturate him or saturate him more, and change the hue or whatever it is that you want to do. It could be any other layer, adjustment layer. But the point is that once you save the selection, if you just remember what slot is in, you can always load that selection by pressing Control Alt and then that number 7 in this case to load him as a selection. Also, no matter what image you're working on, the first 3 slots, or 4 rather, are the RGB composite, red, green, and blue channel. The RGB composite is really interesting. Notice that that's number 2. So then in a composite, or in an image rather, not just a composite, the number 2 slot will be for luminosity. So if you press Control Alt and the number 2, it would load the bright pixels in the image. Control Alt 2 on Windows, Command Option 2 on the Mac. And I can use the curves panel and now adjust only the brighter pixels in the image. If I want to affect the darker pixels in the image, all I need to do is, with the focus on my layer mask, I can press Control I on Windows, Command I on the Mac to invert. And now I'm only targeting the darker pixels in the image, and I can make my adjustments to the darker pixels in the image, like so. Let me see if there's any other questions. How do we color match if we need to color match different body parts from different persons? Yeah, I get it. Basically the same process, but you just have to treat each individual piece separately. But it's the same process. Unfortunately, it's just a lot more work. Eddie's saying you should visit SCAD. I don't know what that is, Eddie. Let me know in the chat. Go fetch your water, please. Yeah, I'm trying to. I would need to. I live in a 2-story place. I would have to run all the way downstairs, and I don't want to take so much time to do that. Cool. But thank you for letting me know to go get some water. Arvind is saying I improve a lot by watching your videos. Thank you so much. We have Vindat from Mumbai. Cool. How can you download Photoshop 2021? Adobe.com. Awesome. Cool. Before we continue, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about our sponsors, MSI. MSI is sponsoring these videos. Actually, if you look on the top right corner right here, you can see we're being sponsored by MSI. Thank you so much, MSI, for sponsoring us. The Photoshop Training Hour is the MSI is the official sponsor for the Photoshop Training Hour. And I just want to talk a little bit about their products. These are products that I actually own. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the MSI Creator 15 laptop. Is the laptop that I'm currently using. If you're interested in checking it out, there's a link in the description to this video. You can click on that and go over and check out all the information about this laptop. But it's a fantastic laptop. As you can see, it's a 4K laptop with true color technology, 100% Adobe RGB for great color representation. It's Calman verified. It has the True Pixel display technology and an awesome GeForce GTX graphic card, which is great if you're doing graphics, which is what I assume you are if you are into Photoshop. This is the desktop where I'm currently streaming this live stream. Is the Aegis T15 or Ti5, I should say. I'm sorry about that. And it's just a really powerful computer. It looks like an alien, like a UFO, but as you can see, it's got a really powerful Intel Core i9 processor, 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it's just a beast. It's a fantastic desktop, so I highly recommend it. And if you're looking at me looking over to my right side, is because I'm looking at my monitor, and the monitor that I'm using is this one right here, the Creator PS32 1QR, and it has Adobe RGB at 99% and sRGB at 99% for great color representation. Just like the laptop, the monitors are calibrated at the factory for great color representation. So thank you so much, MSI, for sponsoring this video or this stream. And if you're interested to find out more about these products, then look down below in the description for the links. So thank you so much, MSI. Let me switch my screen back over into Photoshop so that we can continue. We have about 15 minutes, and I didn't even get to half of the tips and tricks that I wanted to show you, but I hope that the ones you've seen so far have been beneficial to you. Let me know in the chat which one has been your favorite so far. And if there's one one trick or tip that I've shown you that you've enjoyed, do me a favor and tap on that like button now. That's all I'm asking. Just type on that like button now. And if you like, let me know in the chat which tip or trick that was. Cool. Habanero is saying, I love my MSI. Awesome. I'm so happy that you love your MSI. I like my MSI laptop and desktop as well. What about Aussies? Good to see an Aussie in the house. Cool. Oh, in South Carolina. I see what you were talking about, Eddie. You were saying to check out, and I already forgot what place you should visit SCAD. I'm guessing that's what you mean by oh, the Savannah College of Art and Design. Oh, awesome. Got it. Got it. You know what? I've done a couple presentations for several art and design schools. I've done the Academy of Art in here in Silicon Valley. And I've done the Art Institute as well, and I've done a couple other presentations for a couple schools in Boston as well, universities in Boston. So yeah, that'd be awesome. Always up for doing things for schools. Let me see if there's any other questions. Pasido Domingo said, "You are very precise and very intelligible." Thank you. You're welcome. I appreciate that comment. If I only knew about YouTube in high school, there was no YouTube when I was in high school, so I totally get that. Oh, okay, I see, Eddie. You're saying it's in Savannah, Georgia, Savannah College of Art and Design. Very cool place to visit. I may just add it to the list. Thank you so much for that suggestion, Eddie. And yeah, like I have been to the big cities in the East Coast mainly for work-related purposes. You know, New York, Chicago, Boston. You know, those type of places. But I haven't really seen anything in between. So in this road trip that I'm taking, I really want to see all these in-between places that I'm sure are beautiful that I just haven't had an opportunity to visit. So if you have any suggestions, let me know in the chat. Cool. All right, so we just have a few more minutes, about 10 more minutes. So let me show you a couple more tips and tricks. Here's another one. This is probably not the best image, so let me switch the image to show you this next tip. I'm just gonna write the word colorful here on my libraries panel to see what comes up, and this one would be a good photo for that. So let me show you something in Camera Raw. And then I'll show you how you can do something similar in Photoshop. So if you go into Filter, Camera Raw Filter, that will, of course, bring up the Camera Raw Filter. The Camera Raw Filter allows you to have total control of the tonality and color of your image. Under the Color Mixer, you have access to the luminance sliders here. And that simply means that you can darken or brighten the specific color for the slider that you're adjusting. So in this case, reds, oranges, you know, aquas, blues, or any other color that you want. Obviously, you can also control your saturation. I can increase the saturation of the blue or change the hue of the blue, you know, all that stuff. Now, what I'm really focusing on now is the luminance. So again, I can control the luminance of the colors that I have here. So how do I do that with an adjustment layer? Well, there's actually a trick that you can use. You can go into the black and white adjustment layer and you'll get these sliders, which allow you to control the luminosity of the selected colors. So this is actually the best way to make a black and white image because you can totally control the luminosity of the original colors to create a better black and white image, right? Now, what if you want to do that but keep the color? Well, you can use a blending mode. If you click on this drop down and select luminosity, the color comes back and you can adjust the brightness of the colors in the slider. See that? Just like you could with Camera Raw. Now, in my opinion, Camera Raw is better. It's got more sliders. This has 6 sliders. Camera Raw has 8, so it has more separation between the colors, so it gives you more control. But this is in an adjustment layer, so if you wanted a similar adjustment but with an adjustment layer, you can certainly use this technique and get very similar results. Let me see if there's any other questions in the chat. Let's see. And yeah, actually, guys in the chat, like, please ask the questions just one time. Like, if you ask them a bunch of times, I probably will skip them. So, but I will address, like, if I don't answer a question, it's either because it doesn't relate to what I'm talking about, or I just don't have time to explain it. Or in this case, there's a question about shadows in digital painting. I'm not a digital painter, so I wouldn't be able to articulately answer that question. But thank you for asking your question. Awesome, Ali. I'm so happy that the adjustment layer technique saves you a lot of headaches. I'm really, really happy to hear. Cool. Let me move on to the next thing. There's a couple things that I should show you. So I mean, I guess we can do it with this layer here. So you probably know that with the clone stamp tool, you can hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac, and click to sample a source, and then just paint that in a new layer. Let me do that again. And I can just paint, the watch on a new layer, right? I think most of you probably knew this, right? So there we go. She's got 2 watches now. What I don't think that a lot of people know is that there's actually a panel for this particular tool. So if you go into Window and select Clone Source, you have the clone source here on the top. When I click on that, I can continue painting. Oops, that went away. Let me bring it back. Window, clone source. Here we are. So notice that I have the clone source of the watch still there. See that? But I can click on this icon and then add another clone source. So maybe I can do a clone source of like her fingernail or something, right? So then when I go back into my clone source, I can just, paint her finger, in here for whatever reason. And if I want to, I can also select the clone source of the watch, this button here. And now I will paint the watch back in. And obviously where's the watch? I know it's going to come out at some point. But anyway, the point is that here it is. The point is that you can select multiple clone source here. So I can come back into this one and continue painting the hand. And I can come back into this one and continue painting the other part. See, here's the watch finally. There it is. See that? So you can save your clone sources using these boxes, and you have up to 5 clone sources that you can save. Also, when you have something selected, you can obviously see the preview there, right? And something that you can do is you can rotate the clone source. So with the clone source selected here, you can click and drag on this and rotate it. So when I paint, notice that the watch is now rotated. See that? So I can come in here and keep rotating the source. I'll rotate it even more so that you can see how that works. And I know this is like probably the worst example, but as you can see, I'm rotating the clone source. And I can scale the clone source, I can offset it, and I can do all sorts of things. Let me just create a new layer and just do it with one single area. So I can click on the watch, but notice that since I rotated the clone source, now I've rotated the watch, right? So maybe I can come into her hand here and make it seem like she's also wearing a watch. See that? See how I did that just by rotating the clone source? So all you need to do is go into the clone source panel under Window, and then you have more controls over the tools here. And if you need to reset these values, just click on this icon and it resets them. You can see that there. So yeah, so this is how you would control the clone source here in Photoshop. And actually, let me make that larger again. And oops, I think I clicked on the wrong button here. There we go. So clone source is a fantastic way of taking complete control of your clone stamp tool. Let me see if there's any other questions in the chat. Oh, thank you so much, Eddie. I appreciate that. I'm so glad that you bookmarked the channel. Yeah, if you haven't been to the Photoshop training channel before, feel free to subscribe. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Eddie. Curves versus levels. What is my thought on this debate? I don't even know if there's a debate going on that, but I've been hearing people talking about that lately. I'm not sure why. So curves and levels, they're 2 different tools, right? We have levels and we have curves, and they both help you control the luminosity of the image, right? So curves does it by using a curve, right? And one of the arguments that I've heard is that curves is better than levels. And I mean, the short answer is yes and no. what I mean by that is, can curves do everything that levels can? And the answer is yes. But does that make it better or worse that you shouldn't use one over the other? The answer is no, because they each have their purposes, right? So if I wanted to just quickly, just super quickly, make the darkest pixel in the image not black and just make it this shade of gray right here, I would rather do that in curves because it's much easier and much faster and I have more control over it. If I wanted to control the gamma, I can just use this slider because that's what that slider does. It controls the gamma. Now, could I do this in curves? Definitely, of course. But, you know, it would require just a little more work, right? So make my, you know, blacks off white. I have to click and drag this point up, and it just doesn't feel as fast or as efficient. It's still doing the same thing. What about controlling my gamma? Well, now I have to control like these points and make these adjustments, and you know, it's much easier to make a mistake with curves, right? Notice how much more trouble I'm having controlling that midpoint contrast. So curves can do everything that levels can, but it doesn't make it better or worse. They're just different tools for different things. Let me give you an example. Curves can do literally what most of these adjustment layers can do. For example, the invert adjustment layer, right? Invert, there you go. Curves can do that. How can curves do that? You just drag this point down and drag this point up, and there you go. That's the invert adjustment. Does that mean that you shouldn't use the invert adjustment? Of course not. You know, everything has its purpose. And if you're in the belief that just because a particular adjustment layer like curves is better than all the others and it can do everything the others can do and you shouldn't use the others, then I just find that silly, because everything has its purpose. And if that's your belief, then you shouldn't use the curves adjustment layer, because let me show you why. If you believe that the curves adjustment layer is better than everything else and you shouldn't use anything else, then with that same logic, you shouldn't use the curves adjustment layer, because the camera raw filter actually can do everything that the curves adjustment layer can do and more. So don't use the curves adjustment layer, use the camera raw filter, because it gives you all the control of your tonal and color adjustments in this filter. So that's where I stand on that quote unquote debate that, you know, I don't think there's a debate. They're just two different tools, and you should use the tool that best works for the particular job that you're having. You know, just because a tool is better or more powerful doesn't mean you should always use it. Sometimes simplifying things is a bit better. So yeah, that's where I stand on that quote unquote debate. Let me see. Do you have any tutorials on how to get video manipulation? Yes. If you go into my YouTube channel, you can go into playlists, and in here I have, you know, the playlist where I have my compositing tutorials, and they're somewhere in here. I'm just looking for them. I know I have it here. Here we go. Let me just type in compositing here. Oh, here we go. Compositing Photoshop tutorials right here. When you click on that, you'll get to see a list of all my compositing videos. And there's one in particular that addresses that. How to match a subject into any background will be one of those. And also the Photoshop Compositing Secrets live stream. That one should help you answer that question. So yeah, just come in here and check out those compositing videos if you're interested. Pressant is saying curves is a little more difficult for me. Yeah, it could be a little more difficult. Pen tool versus select subject. Well, again, two very different things, right? Like one of them uses pixels to make a selection. The other one uses Bezier curves and mathematical equations to make a cutout or selection. It depends on what you're doing, right? I probably wouldn't use the pen tool to mask hair, but I would use the pen tool to mask, say, a car or something with straight or curved edges. It requires that nice sharper edge. Nothing will give you a sharper edge more than a vector mask. So then in that case, I would select the vector mask. But if I was masking fur, then I would use the pixel-based selection, like select subject or something like that. Cool. Gabriel said there should be a turn levels into curves option to end this debate for once. Again, I don't think there's a debate. They're just two different tools that give you, control over tonal adjustment in different ways. So one just works one way, and then the other works another way. But yeah, I mean, that would be a cool technique, cool like feature to, you know, maybe you started in curves and you want to go into levels or vice versa. That would definitely be a cool feature. What's the difference between the spot healing brush tool and the clone stamp tool? Clone stamp tool simply copies pixels from one area to another. Think about it as copy and paste. And the spot healing brush merges the texture and luminosity of one area into another. So that one is more like a blend, and one is just copy and paste. Cool. Yeah, camera raw filter is not an adjustment layer. Well, it's not an adjustment layer, but you can treat it as an adjustment layer, right? So if you convert it into a smart object, you can go into the camera raw filter, right? And what happened to my camera raw filter? Here it is. I'm just gonna make an adjustment, right? It doesn't matter what it is. There it is. So see, I have a mask. Just like an adjustment layer, I have a mask. So I can paint with black and, you know, treat it like a mask. Also, in some ways, it's even more powerful than an adjustment layer, because I have this little icon here and I can double click on it. And now I have opacity on that specific adjustment and blend mode, which is separate than the opacity and blend mode of the layer. So you have that same control just like you do with an adjustment layer. I know it's not an adjustment layer, but you know, we're gonna get super technical about curves and levels, and we can get super technical about this as well. But anyway, use whatever works for you. So it looks like we're out of time in just a couple minutes. So let me see if I can answer just a few more questions. Cool. What color mode options is very, very important? Oh man, there's so many. Shanaj, I believe your name is pronounced, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. Color mode options that are very important in Photoshop, there's so many. I mean, I wouldn't be able to give you just one. I mean, if I had to say something, I would say, you know, camera raw, probably, just because you have total control of color and tonality. But, you know, I don't know. There's so many other tools that I would use, you know, for that. So, Anurag, I don't remember liking your Instagram post, but maybe if you share a link to it and I look at it, I'll remember what your composite was, or your piece was. Cool. If I could give you any pointers on how to have creative ideas to make digital pictures, this is a hard question to answer, because I feel that different people have different ways to get motivated or inspired. For me, I get inspired and motivated by stories, whether it's books, movies, you know, even podcasts, like whatever. I'm a big fan of storytelling. So stories inspire me to create work, but that may not be true for you. So it's a hard question for me to answer. I would say that you can get inspired by looking at other people's work, by trying new things, you know, museums, all these different things that you look and take into, and then hopefully maybe something in your head sparks for you to create something. So I hope that answer was beneficial. I don't know if it was. Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It's already 11:02 here in California, and it's time to end the stream. I really appreciate you being with me on this third Photoshop training hour, the Photoshop training hour. I almost forgot the name of the show just because this is the first time we're naming it. So I'm using the name that you guys selected. So thank you so much for that. Also, thank you to MSI for sponsoring today's video. Again, the links to the MSI products that I use are below in the description. And do me a big, huge favor. If you enjoyed any one of the tips that I showed today, just click on that like button now and let me know in the comments what that was. I look forward to being back with you again next week. I'm thinking of changing the show to Wednesday, so let me know if that will work better for you, Wednesday or Friday. I figure Friday is the end of the week, so it'll be nice to have a 1 hour Photoshop break where you and I could talk and hang out and just talk about Photoshop, or maybe you can do it middle of the week. I don't know. So I may try a Wednesday to see how that goes. But again, thank you so much. I love everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for sharing all the love and saying hello and everything else. I'm going to be publishing a tutorial in the next couple of days, so we're going to have a regular tutorial pretty soon. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here with me. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.